Recently, I put out a post on Twitter asking for you to all send me ideas for Spartan builds that I can create, so I can make use of the absurd amount of money that I have spent on this game. I know that upon hearing that, some of you have probably just had a mini heart attack and are now blaming me for the death of your favourite franchise because I've spent money on a video game. To that, all I have to really say is, I have a job, and if I want to spend my money on video game cosmetics, that's what I'm gonna do. It may not be the smartest financial decision, but I don't really care. Anyway, enough whinging from me. Today I'll be showing off those various builds that I have created from your ideas, as well as talking about the creative process behind them and my final thoughts on each design. So without wasting any more of your time, let's jump straight in. Now, upon initially making the post, a couple of people just submitted pictures of their Spartans, so I think the message was just a little misunderstood. I didn't want to be copying off of other people's designs, more so just wanted ideas of things that I could create. Now, HaloBox did end up sending you a picture of this pretty cool Marine Spartan on Rakshasa, which I'm assuming the implication here was to actually create a Marine Spartan myself, but my 4 brain cells weren't exactly working at the time. Anyway, we had our first idea from Backfish5927, which was to create something purple. For this one, I decided to jump straight into the Chimera armor core. I know, scary stuff. I threw on the purple coating which I earned for free from the Combined Arms event during Season 5, as well as the Echelon Ecto Visor, making use of one of the helmets from the Season 3 Battle Pass and the shoulder pads from the Sanguine Gift Bundle, creating a Spartan that looked like it was ripped straight out of Evangelion. Which wasn't the intention, but honestly, I'm pretty happy with how this one turned out. Next up, I did end up creating a marine-themed Spartan like HaloBox Studios suggested. Using the Rakshasa armor core, the goal was to create something tactical, but still very lightweight. I ended up using Enigma as it kind of reminded me of the military police helmet, while also using the ODST-themed armor coating and the Helljumper visor. There's quite a few ammo pouches on his chest, and some sniper rounds on his shoulder. Overall, I think this one turned out really good. Next up, J24 Yeehaw asked me to create Dutch from ODST, and rather than just trying to accurately create the character's look, I decided to do something a little bit different. I used the Rakshasa core again, but made sure to throw on the ODST shoulder pads. I was going to get the Sacrifice chest piece just for this, as that is obviously the ODST chest piece on the Rakshasa core, but I decided against it as I liked how this one from the Season 2 Battle Pass looked. I also used Din's helmet because it does have the shark teeth plastered over it, which I thought resembled Dutch quite well. Boinksy then asked me to do a Spartan Elite hybrid, so I thought Chimera was once again going to be the best choice. I ended up using quite the amalgamation here, using the Covenant Frontlines coating, with the Master Builder visor as it blends really well with the coating itself, but I'm also using the Anubis helmet as its narrow design just sort of looks right for this kind of build, as well as using one of the Rakshasa shoulder pads, specifically the Elite one, because come on, that makes sense, and then I also used one of the Yoroi shoulder pads, as some Elite armor clearly has some samurai-esque inspiration. This definitely isn't my favourite of the builds, but I do think it turned out pretty alright in the end, and again it seems to be a relatively popular one. Certain Point then asked to make John Wick if he was a Spartan, so I had to try and create a build that I think John Wick would happily use. The Mark 5B core was the best option for this one as it has the little scarf chest piece, which just felt natural for this kind of build. I've also used one of the knife shoulder pads, the helmet from the Omega Team Super Bundle, specifically the one based on Spartan August, however I didn't use the helmet attachment. It's also got the belt hole visor and one of the Rakshasa shoulder pieces, the Elite Skull one. The goal was to create something that was very tactical, making sure that he was well equipped for anything that he faced, while still maintaining a very dangerous silhouette. The Cinder Ring coating worked perfectly for this, and I definitely think it's a build that the Reaper would approve of. Felix B143 asked me to do something with Primal Glory and the Will-O-Wisp visor. Honestly, not a huge fan of this build overall, as I'm not really that fond of the colour combination. I used the Mark 7 core with this one and an amalgamation of different armour pieces. I don't think the build turned out terrible, but it is far from my favourite one here. Zombie Cupcake 64 said to make the thickest Spartan that I can, so of course Eagle Strike was the correct choice here. I used the extender helmet with its attachment, as well as the Grenadier shoulder pads, as these are obviously some of the biggest shoulders in the game, and these just give it a much wider silhouette than even the Eagle Strike shoulder pads themselves. I threw on the bulkiest chest piece I had, and even the little water bottle to make the silhouette look even wider. I even chose the medkit stance as it really shows off this Spartan's quite bulky frame. I kinda like this build, but I don't think it's one I'd ever actually use in multiplayer. Local Oni Agent then asked me to make a Flood Containment ODST, using the box guard coating and Rick chassis. Unfortunately, I don't have the box guard coating, and they did also ask for it to be an ODST, but I ended up just taking the flood containment thing and using the Rick chassis core to create a pretty interesting hazmat Spartan that I ended up really liking. I used the hazmat variation of the Mark 6 as well as the free hazmat coating and the Hell Jumper visor. We've got the commando shoulder pad on there and the shoulder pad from the War Master bundle, as well as the pipes chest piece that you also got in the Rick chassis core, and honestly I think all of this armor blend together pretty well. Unfortunately though, I don't think this Spartan's going to do a very good job at keeping the flood contained. Digion then threw a bit of a curveball, asking me in my opinion what the 3 unknown members of Omega Team would look like, and these were definitely the most challenging builds yet. I had to try my best to make sure everything was lore accurate, with these Spartans of course using the Mark IV armor core. I wanted them to all stand out from one another while still maintaining that similar look, so that they'd all appear to belong to the same fire team. The coatings I used on the 3 builds are Cadet Grey, Shadow Sorrel and Scorpion Punch, and I used various different pieces of armor from the Omega Team Super Bundle, and I even ended up acquiring the Wilhelm Bundle just so I had enough pieces to actually complete these looks, since I'm still yet to actually complete the current Spirit of Fire operation. This might be an idea that I revisit when I have more stuff for the Mark IV core, but I don't think these turned out terribly. Let's Get Tropical asked me to make a member of Blue Team other than John using the Mark IV core, something similar to their armor in Halo 5. So I chose to try to create Linda. I used the Shikari helmet as it's similar enough to how her helmet looks on the cover of Shadows of Reach. And although the Mark IV core itself is quite bulky, I still wanted to try my best to give her a relatively slender frame. I ended up using the Farah shoulder pads as I thought these were similar enough to how her shoulders look in Halo 5, and I used the Sandgrass Fields armor coating. Me personally, I wasn't too fond of how this one turned out, but a couple of people said that I did a good job. So there's that, I suppose. Hollowtide then asked me to make him, which as he said himself was quite an abstract request. The highlight here is that I used the Mercury helmet with the Santa hat, as there isn't really a beanie in the game, so this was the closest I could get. Smash_Grimlock then asked me to make Godzilla, and I'm a big Godzilla fan, so I wanted to make sure I did this one right. I used the Mark IV armor core because of its bulky frame, the Shadow Sorrel armor coating since it's got that charcoal grey colour. I also used the Master Builder visor to mimic the Atomic Breath, and as a whole I don't think this is the best build that I created, but trying to make a Spartan that resembles Godzilla was far from an easy task, and I don't think the outcome was all that terrible. Stamborg then asked me to create something more cursed than the Spartan that he sent a picture of, so of course I had to use Chimera. This one was completely random and didn't have a ton of thought behind it. I had to just make sure that it was completely terrible to look at. Peter Slug then asked me to create one of 3 clone troopers, so I ended up going for the Jungle Scout Trooper on the left. I used the Mark 7 core for this one, and although you can't see it, I did use the Farah shoulder pads. I've got the little Bandolia chest piece which came in the Soldier bundle, as well as the utility piece from the Tactical Ops event, and the Splinter Desert coating, which I know isn't entirely accurate to the trooper that I'm trying to create, however I thought this was the best one out of the coatings I have. Seaweed Sage then asked me to create a Mark IV build that complements the Firefall CBRN helmet attachment. So I used the ODST coating as well as some shoulder pads from Eagle Strike, and in the end this resulted in a very tanky looking ODST build. Armstrong Gaming asked me to create a Seeker Spartan that people actually like. So I ended up using the Mark 7 core with the Halo World Championship 2022 Victory coating and the belt hole visor, as well as the shoulder pads that came with the Wilhelm bundle, the chest piece from ISR, and I think all of these armor pieces overall worked pretty well together. Fun Little Character then suggested that I create Spartan Lock, and I ended up making 2 for this one. I created a build that I thought was as accurate as I could get to Lock from Halo 5. I did have a few people telling me that helmets like Anubis or Linebreaker would be a little bit better. Honestly, I just went for Trendlock because it has Lock in its name and has a somewhat similar silhouette to the Hunter helmet. Honestly, I would kind of like to see Hunter return at some point, as it is one of the better helmets in Halo 5. Anyway, the first build I used Chimera. Unfortunately, there is closer shoulder pads to Locks like Theocles, however I don't own those. so these builds definitely aren't as accurate as you could get to Spartan Lock. But after the Chimera one, which was trying to be as accurate to Halo 5, I ended up making what a Gen 3 lock could look like, and I prefer this much more than the Chimera one. Golden Brawler then asked me to do one based on him, and again, just like Holotides, this was pretty difficult as it's not really that easy to create a Spartan based on a person. However, I ended up using the Yokai helmet because of the horns. I was going to use Estate Gold, but I don't own that. I used the Scarf chest piece to sort of mimic the hood, and I was going to unequip any shoulder pads, but this made it look a bit too slim, so I ended up using the Wave Slicer ones from the Otomosho bundle. Bro Jojo then asked me to make a medic out of every core. Unfortunately, I wasn't going to do one out of every core, but I did make a pretty cool Mark 7 one with the CQB helmet. I am using one of these shoulder pads from Hazmat there, and this is the Alabaster Cognac coating from the Season 2 Battle Pass, with the golden visor that comes with the Mark 5 Combat Evolved kit, and honestly I'm really happy with how it turned out. Reach V1 then said to create an Oni themed Spartan, so I once again used the Mark 7 armor core. I used the Cadet Grey coating to match the helmet attachment that comes with Anubis, which is of course the helmet that I also used, alongside the Beltol visor, the knife shoulder pad for the Mark 5B, and one of the shoulder pads that came with the Locust bundle, as well as the chest piece that was included with ISR. Lemon to Cocat then requested that I build one based on one of these two Splatoon armor sets, so I did choose the first one. I ended up attempting this one because my partner is a huge Splatoon fan, but in the end, I don't think this is something they'd be very proud of. I did try my best to find accurate armor pieces to this, and I thought Chimera was the best core for the job, alongside the armor coating that was included in the Eren Yes bundle. However, as a whole, I was not proud of this build at all. Smash Grimlock came back with another request, this time being the Bayverse version of Grimlock, but not in his dinosaur form. I used Chimera again with one of the Yoroi helmets thanks to the little horn on its head, and then I used the Dragon shoulder pads as this was the closest I was going to get to this. I don't think this one turned out terrible, but I don't think it was as good as the Godzilla build that I built earlier on. It's not my least favourite, but again, it's probably not one I'd actually use. Elky Lord asked me to build a Demon Spartan, so you already know that I had to bring back the Magpie Leon Mark 1 for this one, as to be honest, you can't get a better Demon Spartan than this. Chaos Reaper 4208 suggested that I build an aquatic themed Spartan, so I got this one picture of a deep sea diver off Google and kinda just rolled with that. Honestly, I don't have too much to say about this build. It was a fun one to work on, but I don't think it's anything too special. Digion reappeared to ask me to create a Spawn who commits rampant tax fraud. That's, again, all I have to really say about this one. Sylvia Foxtress asked if I could make Samus, so I tried my best. I used the Mirage core with the extender helmet and the security shoulder pads. I think this one turned out alright, but it's far from the best one that I built. Eason Wolfie then asked me to do a Robocop build with the Master Builder coating, and I'll take any opportunity to show this thing off, so I once again used Mirage with the base Rikshasa shoulder pads and the security helmet with its attachment, as that alone already looks like Robocop's helmet. We had another Star Wars request, this time from American Chaos, and this time it was to create a Stormtrooper. For this I actually used the base Gungnir helmet without its attachment, and I think for this it really worked. This is surprisingly one of my favourites of all of the builds. I think the armour fits together pretty seamlessly. Of course it doesn't exactly look like a Stormtrooper, but I think it was a solid attempt on my behalf. BossCow2171 said to do an ultra lightweight recon build, strip the kit down to the bare essentials to minimise noise and profile. Of course, Rikshasa was once again the best option for this one. I did throw on a couple of attachments as I thought just using the core with 0 attachments would be a little too boring. So I do have the radio utility piece and one of the iron grip rail shoulder attachments, as well as a helmet attachment on the recon helmet. Again though, I think this is a pretty nice build. This next one was highly requested by a lot of different people, and that was to recreate Isaac Clarke from Dead Space. I used the Hazmat core and purchased the charred bronze coating, and I ended up making 2 different versions of this build, one with the B-less helmet and one with security. I think the one with B-less looks a bit more accurate, but I do kind of prefer how the one with security looks. And if you're curious, the visor I'm using is Neon Superfly. And finally, coming full circle, Backfish 5927 made another request, this time to make the Driller from Deep Rock Galactic. I used the Eagle Strike core with some shoulder pads from Mirage, as I think they had the best overall shape for this, and the Papaya Dust coating with the Kerberos helmet and the Bullfrog visor. It's a pretty basic one, but overall, I don't think this is a terrible build to close out with. Overall, out of all of these, I think the Stormtrooper one was my favourite. Regardless, they were all pretty fun to work on, and I had a lot of fun making this video. I know it's something quite different and quite random. Honestly, when I initially made the tweet, I had no intention of turning this into a video, I just thought it'd be a fun thing to talk about. If this is something you all enjoyed, let me know, because it's something I might consider doing again in the future. And if that is the case, make sure to keep an eye out on my Twitter. But anyway, I think I should wrap things up there. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one.